All right, well, welcome to our Young Investor Society Global Online Club meeting. Today I have Jessica Firestone out of Pennsbury High School, Pennsylvania. She's going to be covering Unit 7, Lesson 3, the investment thesis today. Welcome, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. So yes, today I'm going to be presenting the investment thesis case study right now. So a little bit about me is my name's Jessica. I'm a senior at Pennsbury High School. This is my second year on the YIS Global Student Advisory Board, and this year I am the board secretary. I also run my own branch of the Young Investor Society for my high school, and I first really became interested in business when I took investment management in 9th grade. So let's go into some review of last week and why we create an investment thesis. So an investment thesis is used to recognize the importance of investing in a stock. So you want to identify the true investment thesis and why a stock price is going to go up or down and how that may not reflect the company's true value. So we want to analyze why you own the company stock, what you expect to happen to the company stock, and what you see the market, that the market does not give the company credit for. So for example, this is if a stock is over or undervalued. And you want to compile these components when you're creating your investment thesis to really know that the stock's performance, day-to-day volatility doesn't determine if the investment is a good investment or not. So when you're creating a checklist, it's necessary to compile profitable investments, and understanding the company is a crucial step in developing your reasoning for the investment. So you want to look at the company's worth, also known as its intrinsic value. And this will keep us as investors from latching on to the herd mentality of buying and selling a stock based on simple price fluctuations. And it's important with any fluctuation to ask, is the investment thesis still intact? So when we say investment thesis, what we mean by this is a list of questions that you ask yourself when you analyze a company to determine if the company is a sound investment. So the point of this is that we don't want to simply look at a company and say, oh, the price went up today, so we should buy it. We want to look deeper into the stability of the company and see if that company is a good investment. So moving on to the case study, as you can see, I'm presenting that from the YS course. So James Fletcher is the founder of the Young Investor Society, and in 2007, he came across a company that did video games from South Korea. And he said that this company seemed good because it had a sticky user base, which means it had loyal customers. And also it had this term called a network effect, which meant that the more the game was played, the more attractive the games became to these kids that played them. And also the company had high switching costs. So people who were really invested in this game weren't very likely to abandon it for another new game. And so he felt that these were rare competitive moats within the company. And that means that the company had characteristics that set it apart from others, that maybe helped it have some advantage over other companies in the industry. So James Fletcher decided to invest in this company, even though the industry of video games was a hit or miss industry, meaning that one video game could do very well, whereas another couldn't. It really depended on the users. So he built an investment thesis based on the idea that the existing games would continue to retain their loyal users, as we mentioned above. And despite this industry being that hit or miss with the video games, he felt that this strong development team of the South Korean game company would eventually get a successful game. And then additionally, he said that the current stock price implied no probability to a new game's success. So this means that investors felt the company was the investors were undervaluing the company from what its real success could be, potentially. So James bought the stock, and there was a new game launched shortly after. And so he thought, is this the time in which this company with this competitive moat is going to have its success? But unfortunately, the game was not successful, and the company's stock price fell 50% in just 1 month. Now, at this point, many of the other investors in the company took this opportunity to pull out their investments, to sell the stock, because they felt it was going down and it was not profitable. But what set James apart is that he referred back to his investment thesis and reassessed if this company was still a good investment. So he questioned, did the company still have that sticky, loyal user base on its existing games? And yes, they did. The previous games were still experiencing those loyal users. Additionally, James asked, was the development team of this company still likely to have a hit game in the future? Yes. Even though this first game flopped, there was still the potential that this strong development team would produce a good game that would help the stock's price. And then the third question was the stock undervalued? And yes, the stock became even more undervalued when it went down 50% in that month. So even though the company was volatile in its stock price and going down, and many other investors were pulling out, the investment thesis still held up. So James decided that he could not pull out his investment because this company still had that credibility. So in 2008, another game was launched by the company, and this time it was also a flop, and investors experienced the stock plummeting by 40%, additional to the previous 50%. But the thing is that not one thing changed from the original investment thesis, except for the fact that the stock price was even more attractive now because it was much lower. So investors like to refer to this as high conviction because James' conviction came from having a clearly defined investment thesis, and that gave him the ability to block out this noise or these little volatile changes in the stock. So the following year, the company launched another game, and this game actually became a hit, and the stock had a return of 500%. So James and his clients were extremely excited about this. And the only reason why James was able to make this return on this company was because he followed his investment thesis. And he stuck to his guns, and he decided that despite the past losses, this company still had value. So now we're going to go into some discussion questions. So the first question is, why do we think it's difficult to keep holding onto a good stock when it's going down? And so to this question, I say the ultimate fear of a stock price going down is an investor losing money. And it's very difficult to see the value of a stock dropping and not latch on to this herd mentality that I explained earlier. The herd mentality is related to peer pressure and wanting to sell a company because everybody else does sell that stock. When the stock price goes down, that instills a lot of fear and emotion in investors who don't want to lose money, and they decide to sell. But if the investment thesis holds up, as it did for the example with James, then one should know the intrinsic value of a stock and understand that this fluctuation is temporary. Moving on to our second question. What are the reasons why it's difficult to sell a stock that you bought whose investment thesis may not be valid anymore? So if an investment thesis is no longer valid, it may be difficult as an investor to change your opinion of the company that you once believed in. But a company can lose value and therefore not be expected to grow by you. And this is again where emotion comes into investing and has harmful effects on one's portfolio. If an investment thesis does not hold up to stock, then an investor should not be invested in it anymore because that is no longer deemed valuable or profitable, even if the price is valued high for the stock, because again, these stock prices are temporary and fluctuations occur. So now we're going to watch a little video about an example of an investment checklist.
Is run by Paige investment banker, and their tools help me.
Jason Stitt from Morningstar. We're reporting from the Value Investing Congress in Pasadena, and I'm here with Monish Pabrai from the Pabrai Investment Funds. He talked today about the use of checklists in an investment process, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. Thanks for joining me, Monish.
Jason, great to be here.
So the first question for you, you went through some examples of some industries where checklists have become critical, and I think that, you're sort of implying that you started some of your research about checklists there. What did you find in those industries, and what did you learn about how checklists were employed there?
Well, what I found is that they had profound before and after impacts, life-altering impacts. So, for example, in aviation, extremely unsafe to extremely safe, without much of a price being paid. The same with medicine, where the basic stuff, the most important thing I learned was that when you look back at investing mistakes or surgery mistakes or aviation mistakes, the cause is elementary. The cause could have been prevented kind of a priori.
So it seems like one of the key things that sort of went across all the checklists was this idea of mistakes. So the checklist was born out of mistakes. So how important is that when you're thinking about building a checklist?
Yeah, I think mistakes is the best way, like the FAA does with aviation. I think it's a very powerful way because it means that, especially if you look at mistakes of the greats, it means that there was a great mind. It could be Warren Buffett, it could be John Templeton. It was a great mind that missed something elementary. And so one should ask, why did that happen?
And so you actually, tell me a little bit about the process of building this checklist. So, it's a great to think, let's sort of think about people's mistakes, but you're actually going out and looking at, past reports from some funds and compiling these mistakes. How is that process working?
The processes work great. I did what I would call a quick first pass where I've got about, 80 positions that my stocks and other people's stocks that they had mistakes. But I think I only scratched the surface. So, for example, I'd love to, in fact, I'm going to do it this summer with the help of an intern. I'd like to look at like Longleaf Partners or Third Avenue and look at all their mistakes over the last 20 odd years. And so first create the list of the mistakes. The second part, which is a little more difficult, is to reverse engineer what happened. In some cases, the Longleafs and Third Avenues have talked about it. So you can go to the letters and look at it. In other cases, they haven't. It has never been publicly talked about. So those will be a little harder to figure out.
About how many items do you have on your checklist?
There's about 80 items currently.
And so, do you find that that size of a checklist that, you can get bogged down in that, or how long does it take you to?
It actually goes very fast. I think running the checklist takes about half an hour.
And your checklist, is it something that, other people could use, or, how is it employed? I mean, how personal is the checklist?
I think if I were to publish it, it would be of some use, but I think a person will get the most value if they built their own, because I think it would just get seared into their psyche better, and they would take it more seriously.
There's just some things that you as a person, you need that checklist.
That's right. Yes, that's right. I think each of us is wired differently, and we're going to look at things differently. So.
And have you credited your own checklist with, saving you from a few mistakes since you?
I think it's been fundamental. A fundamental shift in Pabrai funds since the use of checklist.
Well, great. Thanks so much for your insights. I think it's a very useful tips for investors, and hopefully they can go out and make their own checklist as well. Thanks for joining me, Monish.
Thank you. All right, great.
Okay, so what we learned from this video is that it is most important to create your own investment checklist, and this can be compiled of yes and no questions. So some examples of components that you want to have in an investment checklist include understanding what is moving the stock price and what the market is pricing the stock at. And if your views are different than these, for example, if you don't think the stock is valued accurately. Additionally, you want to understand how the company earns money, and does the company have a clear competitive moat? For example, an advantage over another company in the industry. And as we saw in the example with James Fletcher, that company had a clear competitive moat over the others, and that made it important to invest in the company because it was different and it had that value that the others did not. And then finally, you want to ask yourself, have you reached the investment conclusion on your own, and believe that even if people that like the stock now reverse their opinion, it wouldn't sway your own. So you want to be set in your opinions of the stock without getting that emotion, without following that herd mentality of what others feel. So as the stock pitch competition comes up soon, we want to be using these skills to assess our potential stocks that we could be pitching. And some examples of those companies are, some examples of those investment thesis guidelines is the company understandable? Does it have that strong competitive moat? Is it managed stably? And is it well priced, overperforming, underperforming? And are the customer bases sticky or loyal if that's applicable to the company? So in summary, we want to know the stocks that you own and know why you own them. Creating and constantly reevaluating an investment thesis is the most crucial tool to keep yourself on track and disciplined as an investor. So watching those small price fluctuations is not crucial if you understand the company's value and it holds still even with changes to the stock. And additionally, if news does not impact that investment thesis, it's just noise. But if new data comes out about a company giving an either higher conviction or higher concern about the investment thesis, then that noise matters and it becomes news that you should use to reevaluate your investment thesis. So thank you so much for joining me on this lesson about the case study for the investment thesis.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. That was a great presentation. I really loved your slides, and everything was just really concise and neatly understandable. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.